more emotionally available you are, the less people respect you. That sentence sounds wrong, almost offensive. It clashes with everything you've been taught about being likable, being decent, being a good person. But if you're honest, you've seen it play out. You show up warm, you listen carefully, you explain yourself, you give people the benefit of the doubt, you stay patient when others are sharp, distracted, or careless. And at first, it feels right. Then slowly, almost invisibly, something begins to slip. People interrupt you mid-sentence. They respond late to your messages. They joke at your expense and call it nothing serious. They speak to you casually, familiarly, without checking tone, not overt disrespect. Just enough to signal something changed. And that's the dangerous part. Because when respect erodes quietly, you don't know when to fight back. You don't know when the line was crossed. You just feel smaller in the room than you used to. And when you finally notice, the advice you hear is always the same. Communicate more. Be clearer about how you feel. Open up so they understand you. That advice sounds mature, healthy, reasonable. It's also the fastest way to lose the little leverage you still have. Because respect does not come from being understood. It comes from being unreadable. If this already feels uncomfortably familiar, like this video and subscribe. Not for motivation, but to mark that you see the pattern. The moment people can fully map your emotions, know what hurts you, what makes you anxious, what you tolerate, what you'll forgive, they stop handling you carefully. Warmth leaks information. Your patience tells them how far they can push. Your openness tells them what to use. Your kindness tells them you won't retaliate. And people, without malice, without planning, adjust to that. They don't think, I'll disrespect this person. They think, I can. That's the truth most people never say out loud. Disrespect isn't always hatred. Most of the time, it's familiarity without restraint. And here's where the shift begins. Not with anger, not with confrontation, not with cold hostility, but with containment, with fewer explanations, with slower responses, with emotional signals that stop broadcasting. The moment you stop leaking your inner world, the moment you stop being immediately available, the moment you become slightly harder to read, people pause. They adjust their tone. They measure their words. They think twice. Because uncertainty creates caution, and caution creates respect. That's why the moment you go cold, not bitter, not cruel, just controlled, something shifts. Warm people don't get stepped on because they're weak. They get stepped on because they're visible. That distinction matters, because if you misunderstand the problem, you'll try to fix the wrong thing. You'll think you need to become louder, tougher, more assertive. Or worse, you'll think something is wrong with your personality. There isn't. The issue is leakage. Warmth leaks information. Every time you express how you feel immediately, people learn your emotional thresholds. Every time you explain your intentions, they learn how you move. Every time you soften a boundary to avoid tension, they learn where the edges really are. You think you're being clear? They're gathering data. And the most uncomfortable truth is this. People don't consciously exploit this. They don't sit there plotting how to disrespect you. It happens beneath awareness. Familiarity lowers restraint. When someone feels safe around you, they stop monitoring themselves. They interrupt more. They speak more casually. They take liberties they would never take with someone they perceive as unpredictable. Not because they dislike you, because they know you won't snap. And that's where the shame creeps in. You start asking yourself questions you shouldn't have to ask. Did I say something wrong? Am I being too sensitive? Should I explain myself better? But here's the line that changes everything. People don't disrespect you because they hate you. They disrespect you because you're safe. Safe to test, safe to push, safe to ignore consequences. Pause here and leave this in the comments. My warmth is no longer free. Warmth without restraint signals unlimited access. It tells people you can come closer without permission. It tells them you don't need to measure your tone. It tells them there's no real cost here. And once that signal is sent repeatedly, respect begins to decay, not dramatically, but structurally. This is why being nice often backfires. Warmth is not strength. Warmth can be strength when it's chosen, when it's controlled, when it's withheld as easily as it's given. But warmth that flows automatically, warmth that requires no discipline, becomes exposure. And exposure invites erosion. The mistake most warm people make is assuming respect comes from transparency, from letting others fully see them, from emotional accessibility. It doesn't. Respect comes from calibrated access, from knowing when to speak and when not to, from deciding what gets revealed and what stays contained, from being warm by choice, not by default. This is why going cold feels uncomfortable at first. It feels like you're withholding something, like you're being distant, like you're doing something wrong. But you're not becoming cruel. You're becoming contained. Coldness, in its correct form, is not hostility. It's discipline. It's the ability to stop broadcasting your inner world, to slow your reactions, to deny people emotional leverage they never earned. And once you understand this, the shift becomes inevitable. Because coldness isn't cruelty, it's containment. If you're starting to realize how often access has been taken for granted, hit subscribe and share this. Some people don't need advice, they need friction. Next, coldness has a bad reputation. People hear the word and immediately think of bitterness, anger held too long, emotional shutdown, someone who's been hurt and turned hard. That's not what this is. Machiavelli wasn't emotionally cold in the way people imagine. He wasn't rage-filled. He wasn't detached from reality. He wasn't cruel for the sake of cruelty. He was strategically distant. And that distinction is everything. His power didn't come from emotional intensity. It came from emotional timing, delayed reactions, measured access, selective silence. Where others rushed to respond, he waited. Where others explained themselves, he observed. Where others reacted emotionally, he stayed unreadable. That distance created leverage. Because when you don't react on cue, people lose control of the interaction. They don't know where you stand. They don't know how far they can push. They don't know what you'll tolerate or what you'll remember. And uncertainty forces restraint. This is where most people get it wrong. They think going cold means becoming hostile. They think it means stonewalling, punishing, withdrawing affection dramatically. That's emotional behavior too, just inverted. True coldness is not hostility, it's unreactivity. Hostility still leaks emotion. Anger still gives people feedback. Defensiveness still hands them information. Coldness gives them nothing. It doesn't snap. It doesn't explain. It doesn't rush to repair. It simply removes access. That's why coldness feels so powerful to others. They can sense the discipline behind it. When someone reacts slowly instead of instantly, when they don't fill silence, when they don't mirror emotional spikes, the room recalibrates. People start choosing their words more carefully. They test less. They expose themselves more, because emotional discipline shifts the balance of control. This is why the key line matters. Coldness is emotional discipline, not emotional absence. You still feel, you still notice, you still understand. You just don't hand your emotions to the room for free. You decide when they're relevant. You decide when they're visible. You decide when they're used, and that decision alone separates people who are respected from people who are merely tolerated. Most people live reactively. Their emotions lead, and their behavior follows. That makes them predictable, and predictability is easy to manage. Machiavellian coldness flips that order. Behavior leads. Emotion is observed, not obeyed. And once people sense that you're not emotionally available on demand, they stop treating you casually. Not because you demanded respect, but because you stopped making yourself easy to handle. Coldness isn't about becoming less human. It's about becoming less readable. And that's where control begins. The shift doesn't announce itself. There's no dramatic confrontation, no speech, no visible power grab. It happens quietly. The moment you go cold, calm, contained, unreactive, something in the room changes. People pause. Not because you said something intimidating, not because you asserted dominance, because you didn't do what they expected. Where they expected warmth, you gave stillness. Where they expected explanation, you gave restraint. Where they expected emotional access, you gave none. And that pause matters. In that pause, people start explaining themselves. They clarify. They soften their tone. They add context you didn't ask for. Not because you demanded it, because uncertainty makes humans nervous. Warmth invites probing. When someone feels emotionally accessible, people push gently at first. A joke, a comment, a casual interruption. And if there's no resistance, the probing continues. That's how boundaries erode. But coldness interrupts that pattern. When you don't respond immediately, when your face doesn't register offense or reassurance, when you don't rush to smooth things over, people hesitate. They start testing less, because testing requires feedback, and you're not giving any. This is the psychology most people miss. Humans don't respect what feels familiar. They respect what feels uncertain, not chaotic uncertainty, calibrated uncertainty. The kind that makes someone think, I'm not sure how far I can go here. That hesitation is respect taking shape. This is where the status dynamic flips. A warm person is predictable. You know how they'll respond. You know what bothers them. You know how to bring them back into harmony. That makes them easy to manage. A cold person is risky to challenge, not because they're aggressive, but because the outcome is unclear. You don't know if they'll engage. You don't know if they'll remember. You don't know if access is being quietly withdrawn. And that uncertainty forces self-control in others. People choose their words more carefully. They check their tone. They stop assuming. All because you stopped offering emotional availability on demand. This isn't about intimidation. It's about friction. Warmth removes friction. Coldness restores it, and friction is what keeps people from crossing lines. That's why the anchor line matters. People don't respect what they can freely touch. When access is unlimited, respect decays. When access is controlled, respect recalibrates. Going cold doesn't make you less human. It makes your presence heavier. And once people feel that weight, they move differently around you. That's the shift. Quiet, invisible, irreversible. Next, Coldness isn't a mood. It's a pattern. And when people feel respect shift around you, it's not because of one dramatic act. It's because of small, consistent behaviors that quietly remove their leverage. Here is the cold code, 5 silent behaviors that change how people treat you without you ever announcing a boundary. First, you react slower than expected. When someone pushes, questions, or challenges you, you don't respond instantly. You let the moment breathe. That delay does something powerful. It interrupts their momentum. People rely on speed to control interactions. A fast reaction gives them information, emotion, intention, vulnerability. When you slow down, they lose their grip. Silence isn't emptiness. It's pressure. Second, you stop narrating your emotions. Warm people explain how they feel. Cold people don't. You stop saying things like, "I didn't mean it that way. I was just trying to help. That caught me off guard." The moment you narrate your inner state, you hand someone a map. Coldness removes the map. Your feelings still exist, but they stay private. Unexplained emotion is unexploitable emotion. Third, you answer without elaboration. Short responses create authority, not rude, not dismissive, just complete. You answer the question and stop. No background, no justification, no padding. Elaboration is often a subconscious plea for agreement. When you remove it, you signal that approval is unnecessary. People sense that instantly. Fourth, you withdraw attention before conflict escalates. Warm people try to resolve tension. Cold people disengage early. You don't argue. You don't chase closure. You don't stay in conversations that begin to tilt disrespectful. Attention is currency. When you pull it back calmly, you send a message stronger than confrontation ever could. You are not invested enough to fight, and that unsettles people far more than anger. Fifth, you let silence finish conversations. Most people rush to fill gaps. Cold people let silence do the work. You stop speaking, and you don't rush to rescue the moment. Silence forces others to reveal themselves. They explain, they soften, they retreat, or they expose insecurity. You don't need to win the exchange. You let silence close it. This is the key insight behind all of it. Coldness works because it denies people emotional leverage. No reactions to manipulate, no reassurance to drain, no access to press against. You don't become distant to punish others. You become contained to protect your position, and once people realize they can't pull you emotionally, they adjust every time. Next, coldness isn't theory. You can watch it work in real time, not in dramatic showdowns, but in ordinary moments where power quietly shifts. Let's ground this in reality, at work. A warm response sounds like this: over-explaining your decisions, justifying your choices before anyone challenges them, filling silence so no one misunderstands you. The result? You sound uncertain, even when you're right. A cold response is different. You state your position once. You answer questions without defending your competence. You stop talking when the point is made. And something recalibrates. People stop interrupting. They phrase disagreements more carefully. They begin seeking your approval instead of testing it. Less explaining becomes more authority. In relationships, warmth shows up as reassurance. Constant check-ins. Explaining your intentions so no one feels uneasy. The result? You become predictable and taken for granted. A cold response doesn't mean withdrawal or punishment. It means emotional self-control. You don't rush to soothe insecurity that isn't yours to manage. You allow space. You let absence do what words can't. And paradoxically, interest grows. Less reassurance creates more pursuit. In social settings, warm people try to contribute constantly. They fill gaps. They perform engagement. The result? They blend into the noise. Cold presence is quieter. You speak less. You observe more. You let others lean in. And attention shifts. People look toward you before speaking. They check your reaction. Your words land heavier because they're rare. Less talking earns more attention. In conflict, warm reactions rush to defend, to correct misunderstandings, to prove intent. The result? The conflict stretches. Cold responses do the opposite. You don't escalate. You don't justify. You don't argue to be understood. You acknowledge or you disengage. And most conflicts die there. Less defense leads to faster retreat. In every scenario, the pattern is the same. Warm response leads to loss. Cold response forces recalibration, not because coldness dominates, but because it denies leverage. And when leverage disappears, behavior changes, always. There is a line most people don't see until they've already crossed it. And once they do, coldness stops working. Coldness is powerful only when it comes before resentment, not after. This is where many people fail. They stay warm too long. They tolerate small disrespect. They explain themselves again and again. They keep access open while quietly swallowing irritation. And then one day, they go cold. But it's too late. At that point, the coldness isn't discipline, it's punishment. And people can feel the difference immediately. Coldness that comes from control feels calm. Coldness that comes from resentment feels sharp. The first creates respect. The second creates tension. When you wait too long, coldness becomes bitterness. Your silence isn't neutral, it's charged. Your distance isn't composed, it's hostile. Your restraint isn't powerful, it's reactive. And instead of recalibrating the dynamic, it escalates it. This is why proper coldness must be proactive, not reactive. You don't go cold because you're hurt. You go cold because you're disciplined. You don't withdraw to punish. You withdraw to protect your internal state. You don't remove warmth as a threat. You remove it as a boundary. That distinction is everything. Calm coldness signals control. Bitter coldness signals loss of control. One makes people adjust. The other makes them defensive. Coldness works only when it's quiet, only when it's clean, only when it's free of emotional charge. The moment your coldness carries anger, disappointment, or the need to teach a lesson, you've already lost leverage, because now you're reacting. True coldness isn't an emotional swing. It's a steady temperature. It doesn't rise. It doesn't fall. It simply holds. And that's why it works. People don't fear hostility. They adapt to it. What they respect is calm withdrawal, controlled distance, unemotional restraint. So the warning is simple, but critical. If you're going cold to make someone feel something, you're already late. Coldness is power only when it's calm. If this changed how you think about emotional control, subscribe. This channel isn't about expression. It's about leverage. There's a moment where something deeper changes. Not just how people treat you, but how you see yourself inside the dynamic. Before, your identity was built around access. You explained so no one misunderstood you. You reassured so no one felt uncomfortable. You chased harmony so tension never formed. You believed respect came from being reasonable, from being fair, from being emotionally available. And that identity made you useful, but not respected. Then the shift happens. You stop managing other people's comfort. You stop narrating your intentions. You stop chasing emotional alignment. And instead, you observe. You listen without rushing to respond. You answer only what's asked, nothing more. You let silence sit without rescuing it. Most importantly, you stop adjusting yourself to keep access open. You're no longer someone who needs to be understood. You become someone who decides who gets access. You don't withdraw aggressively. You withdraw selectively. Some people get warmth. Others get distance. And many don't even realize why the temperature changed, but they feel it. Conversations become more careful. Tone shifts. Behavior tightens. Because access is no longer guaranteed, this is when respect appears. Not because you asked for it, but because it's the price of entry. You don't demand respect. You remove access. And when access disappears, people adjust. They speak differently. They test less. They approach with restraint, not because you became intimidating, but because you became unavailable to casual disrespect. That's the real transformation, from someone people lean on to someone people lean toward. From accessible to respected. At a certain point, coldness stops being something you do. It becomes something people feel before you ever speak. Cold people don't assert themselves because they don't need to. Their presence already does the work. It starts with posture. Not stiff, not dominant, just settled. You don't lean forward trying to be heard. You don't shrink trying to be agreeable. You occupy space without announcing it. That alone changes how people approach you. Then there's stillness. Most people fidget when tension rises. They fill silence. They move to relieve pressure. Cold people don't. They stay still when others shift. They let moments stretch without rescuing them. They don't rush the energy back to comfort. And that stillness unsettles people because it signals control. Your face barely reacts. Not blank, not hostile, just unreadable. No exaggerated nods, no defensive expressions, no emotional leakage. People can't tell if they impressed you, offended you, or missed entirely. And when feedback disappears, people become cautious. Eye contact does the rest. Calm, direct, unhurried, not staring, not avoiding. Just enough to signal awareness without invitation. It tells people, I see you. But I'm not chasing connection. Even your exits change. You don't linger to soften departures. You don't explain why you're leaving. You don't apologize for ending conversations. You exit slowly, cleanly, without emotional residue. And here's the thing most people don't understand. None of this looks dramatic. There's no confrontation, no boundary speech, no power move. Yet the room adjusts anyway. People lower their voice. They choose words more carefully. They hesitate before interrupting. Not because you demanded respect, but because your presence removed entitlement. This is why cold people don't assert themselves. Assertion is loud. Coldness is silent. Assertion tries to correct behavior. Coldness prevents it. People don't know what changed. They just feel it. They sense that access is limited, that reactions aren't automatic, that comfort isn't guaranteed, and without realizing it, they rise or retreat to match your temperature. That's the final layer, when coldness stops being a tactic and becomes the atmosphere around you. Respect was never something people gave you. That's the illusion. Respect is not a reward for kindness. It's not payment for patience. It's not something you negotiate by explaining yourself better or being more emotionally available. Respect is a reaction. It's triggered. Triggered by discipline, triggered by boundaries, triggered by emotional restraint. People don't wake up and decide to respect you. They feel it when access disappears. They sense it when reactions slow down. They adjust when your emotions stop being freely available. That's when the dynamic shifts. Not because you became colder toward them, but because you stopped leaking yourself into every interaction. Coldness doesn't push people away. It filters them. The entitled leave first. The careless drift away. The ones who relied on your warmth without giving respect in return quietly fade. And what remains? Only people who understand restraint. Only people who move carefully. Only people who respect limits. That's the part no one warns you about. When you go cold, you don't lose people. You lose misuse. You lose familiarity without permission. You lose casual disrespect disguised as comfort. You lose the obligation to perform emotional labor just to be treated properly. Coldness isn't punishment. It's protection. Protection of your energy. Protection of your boundaries. Protection of your authority. You're not becoming distant to hurt anyone. You're becoming contained so you stop being touched everywhere. Because the truth is simple. People only disrespect what they can freely access. So go cold, not to punish. Go cold, not to withdraw in bitterness. Go cold, to protect what should never have been open in the first place. Because the moment you stop leaking emotion, respect follows. Like this video. Not as approval, but as a commitment to restraint. Subscribe if you're done explaining yourself to people who haven't earned access. And before you go, lock this in the comments. I control access. Because once people feel boundaries without explanation, they stop testing.